after 40 minutes. So we have a hard stop too. So,
Okay.
what I'd like to know more about, if you can, Jeff, you've been on this journey of sustainability now for a lot longer than your tenure at US Rubber. So, if you can, because you and I happen to share a common theme in this, and that Ray C. Anderson was somebody that you knew.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit, give me some background on how you got into the sustainability movement and what brought you out here to US Rubber.
Yeah, so the way I got started was back in 2005 and 2006.
Okay.
I was president and CEO of a company called the Taylor Companies. We manufactured high-end office furniture in Cleveland, Clarksdale, Mississippi, and then up in Linwood, up in Los Angeles. And we were building a new factory in a suburb in Cleveland called Bedford. And the only place we could build that factory was on a remediated brownfield.
Mm,
And it came down to a simple question. So the brownfield, okay, obviously there's an environmental impact there by remediation and bringing to life land. It was literally abandoned for 18 years, and it had the usual suspects of bad stuff in the ground, and so it required about a 6 to 9 month remediation action where the soil, I don't remember all the details now, the soil was exported to build upon. But the question came down to, how are we going to pay for this? We're building a new facility, a new factory, a fairly large one, of 72,000 square feet on about 12 acres. And we started looking at our utility costs, because in the factory we came from, we had very high utility costs. So the first thing we looked at was how do we reduce our consumption of utilities, electricity and natural gas. And then it turned into, well, where else can we save money? Then it turned to waste diversion. We were doing some things with sawdust. We've been doing since the 70s by taking sawdust, instead of sending it to landfills, it's clean. We were having it sent to horse farms for
mhm.
bedding. So
Okay.
that's how we began the journey. Figuring out, we basically did an evaluation of the waste streams that we created in our factory and tried to figure out what could be recycled, what could be upcycled, what could be reduced. And that's how it began. And we started getting some regional notoriety for the remediation effort of the brownfield, and then questions, sort of like yourself, asking questions. Well, what other measures have you taken for a triple bottom line impact? And we ended up reducing and I can't remember the exact number, but it was close to 70%. Our energy consumption was reduced by 70%, somewhere in there, upper 60s, low 70s, somewhere in that ballpark. And in the waste diversion, we literally got this is a 72,000 square facility. We had 1 6 cubic yard dumpster pick up every other week. That's how little waste we were generating out of this factory. And we had reduced our waste hauling bills, I remember, by about $125,000 a year. So the scrap lumber, the sawdust, the scrap leather, the cardboard, the plastics, all those the leather was upcycled. We found a company out of Montreal that made purses out of the scraps. They bought the scraps from us. And then everything else was upcycled, everything else was recycled. The scrap lumber we sold off to the Amish for energy consumption, for greenhouse. They would do, Cleveland, you have winters, obviously, to
Right,
warm
right.
the greenhouses. They would make energy blocks out of them. We also had some companies that did, they were what they called deconstruction companies. They would tear down buildings and pull out all the valuable materials, and then they would take our scrap lumber. So, for example, they would tear down a schoolhouse from 1910
Hmm.
and retain the shingles,
Right.
and the slate, and then they would make coasters out of them. And the wood holder would be from our scrap lumber, and the shingles would be from the school. And they'd have a little story about what was on it, with how they made these products. So it was pretty cool. We did there too. That was a company called, I forgot, something named Cleveland in it, but anyhow, that's how we were just very creative to find out who wanted to take our waste stream and turn it into a feed stream. So that's how I began the journey. And that really kicked in about 2009. So it's been over a decade.
Well, let me ask you this, because basically, the way you kind of portrayed that, Jeff, it was like it just kind of emerged. But clearly, you didn't just begin this in 2005. You must have thought about this before. And what kind of got you in this direction? I mean, they're
Well,
reward.
yeah, I think the biggest thing is, as you know, the triple bottom line, people, planet, and prosperity. And often, I always, I've given quite a few speeches on this topic, but typically, I make the analogy that people can relate to is like a charity. With a charity, you write a check or you donate cash or something of in-kind value. And when you do that, two things happen. One is the charity receives some funds, they benefit from that. And two, you get a tax deduction if they qualify as a
Right,
501c3
right,
or whatever it is. So whether you want it or not, two things happen. It's the same thing with sustainable practices. Three things happen. If you do it right, there'll be something for the planet, something for the people, prosperity, and the environment. And that's how, even though if your focus is only on one thing, in our case, the one thing was, how are we going to save money to pay for this new manufacturing facility we're putting in? And even before that, going back to the 70s, we're spending all this is long before my time, but we were spending all this money on hauling off sawdust.
right.
And it was costing the company, well, back then, probably hundreds and hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, because it was tons. It was 40 cubic yards per month of
Wow,
sawdust. That's
wow.
compacted. So it was quite
Right.
a bit. And it's all clean, or it was
Yeah.
all clean. And I heard the story on how it got started was somebody ordered flowers in the office.
Right.
And the flower company, the owner, came over to deliver the flowers, and their daughter had a horse farm.
Yeah,
And
right.
they saw the pile of sawdust going to be hauled off to the landfill. And they said, "Hey,
Right.
my daughter would like to buy that." That's when the light bulb went off. So
Yeah,
it really just started with saving money, and then
right.
you start realizing the environmental impact that you could have on it. Because embedding sustainable practices into your business, it is you always do get that triple bottom effect. It is good for the planet. It is good for your company, and you can't do, if you do it right, you get the full package. You don't just get one or the other. You get all of it.
Well, that's an interesting point. I think one of the things that I've seen, and you've kind of alluded to, there's a myth out there that somehow if you're practicing the triple bottom line, and you mentioned it, that somehow you can't succeed in that. And I think there has been this idea out there that if somebody's trying to be green or trying to reduce waste or whatever, it's expensive. And you've refuted that quite clearly. And basically, that was your initial motivation. It wasn't that you weren't concerned about the environment, but clearly, as a CEO of a company that's manufacturing furniture, you were trying to reduce costs. Is that fair?
It is a very, very fair assessment. And that's how it began. And we put, again, I apologize, it's been a few years now. It's been almost 10 years since I left. But I do remember we were saving about $150,000 a year on waste diversion and energy conservation at one factory.
Wow.
So that's a big chunk of change. And to your point, I got involved in where I got to meet Ray Anderson was in Cleveland in 2009. They had a sustainability summit in August. And luckily, because I developed a bit of a reputation, our company did, and I had spoken a few times. There was quite a few people that were involved with the formation of this event. They decided to have me speak on a panel, and Ray Anderson I sat next to him, he was on that panel, and just to share my story or our story.
Mhm.
And like you said, what is the journey? What was the mindset behind it? He shared, with his company, and obviously, Ray was a legend and obviously on the forefront of it all. But how they had focused on waste diversion and even into the design of their product, because it all made sense. And for us, like I said, it started with the build. It started with the construction of a building. That's when we really became aware. But to your point, we were doing it for decades before that. But also, it makes sense because sustainable practices are a closed loop system where there is no waste. And
Right.
we've operated our planet for far too long in business and manufacturing on a linear equation, which doesn't work, where you manufacture, consume, dispose, and it just ends up, it starts piling up. And you're going to run out of resources, and you're going to obviously pollute the planet, whether it's in the air, the water, the land, whatever it may be. So everything that I learned and being involved with that summit in Cleveland, the idea was it was 2009. The idea was in one decade, which was last year, it was the 50th anniversary of when the Cuyahoga River caught on fire in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Now, Cleveland was not the only city that had river fires, but Cleveland, I think, had, and that was the last one Cleveland had, was in 1969.
Right.
And ironically, because of that fire, and the reason Cleveland got national notoriety was the mayor went to Congress and asked for help to clean up the river because the
Right.
steel mills were polluting it. And that's how the EPA was created, from that
Yes.
initial
Yeah.
thing.
In fact, in '69 was the 13th time it had caught on fire.
Yeah, it was quite a bit. Yeah, and I remember, but so the idea was to make Cleveland a sustainable city in all aspects 50 years later. So that was the purpose of the summer. And each year of the decade that followed from 2009 until last year, the idea was to focus on one aspect of the community to improve. So for us, at Taylor, we really embedded that mindset and that practice into all aspects of our business model. And it really paid off handsomely because, again, it not only reduced costs, it not only helped the community, it made us more profitable as a company, on a per unit basis, which enabled us to pay better wages and better benefits to our employees. But also in the end, it helps on the marketing side because over the years, and this is going to continue to grow, there is a larger and larger constituency where the narrative of your product is more important or as important as the product itself.
Mm.
And all things considered, it can be the tie-breaking,
Right.
criteria. So
No,
we
do you mind explaining that a little bit more? I think that's an important concept, Jeff. And I think what you're saying is that, having a product is one thing, but people today, are looking for meaningful stories. Is that a fair assessment of that?
Yeah, we as consumers, I don't care who you are, we
Yeah.
align ourselves with the brands we buy.
Yeah.
You'll see someone who rides, I'm not a motorcycle rider, but you'll see someone who rides a Harley Davidson.
Right.
They'll get a Harley Davidson tattoo on their arm.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how much they believe in that brand.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
That story transcends the story of Harley Davidson, transcends. There's lots of people that make motorcycles, but there's something unique and special about Harley Davidson.
Right.
So the same thing can be with sustainable practices, where all things considered, if you're doing the right things and you're reducing greenhouse gas emissions, that was another thing we got into it. We started tracking that and finding ways to reduce. But if your sustainable story, your narrative is powerful, and all things considered, there's a large audience out there. It's a growing audience that are going to pick your product over somebody else's product because your narrative aligns better with the consumer's value system and who they identify with. So what they believe in, what you believe in, they believe in. They connect with you in that manner. It's way beyond just the widget itself. And we recognized that way back, 2009, more than a decade ago. But that's when, if we want to move forward to today, that's the same thing with U.S. Rubber. I mean, U.S. Rubber, here in Colton, we are taking a waste stream, which is discarded truck tires, diverting it from California landfills to turn it into a feed stream. We have suppliers who grind up the tires and those granulators provide us the crumb, and we make flooring or underlayment. Well, actually, we make flooring from it, and then the waste from our own operations is recycled, if you will, internally, and we make that from that regrind of that scrap. We make underlayment with it, which is the acoustical sound abating material for multi-story buildings. So at the end, there is no waste, and it's a cool story about the change or converting the waste stream to a feed stream. That's nice, but there's a lot of companies today that do that in the sense of recycle at a certain level. Mm-hmm. But the second half of our story is probably the more impactful, more notorious, where we look at the people side. So it's people, planet, and prosperity. And as you know, Ray, 2/3 of our workers in the factory are ex-felons, and they're turning their lives around, and they're now becoming, they now are not even becoming, they are, productive, citizens of the community again.
Right.
And the question I've been asked several times is, why do you do that? Or why should companies do that? Whether it's personal to us or in general.
Right.
And I think the answer to that question is pretty simple, because now not every company can do it because of the nature of what they do. However, those that can should. And what do I mean by that? Should what? Should most ex-felons, not all ex-felons are redeemable or should be given a second chance. Some, I look at, if you, well, plus they still may be in prison. If they're murderers, rapists, something, a very high degree of felony, or the repeated felons, that may not be a fixable scenario. But there are many, many, many ex-felons who can redeem themselves, who can turn it around. And why is that important for the community? Because if the community does not give them that second chance, the business community does not give them that second chance, they have two choices. They're left with only two choices: go back to crime or become homeless. Right. And in both cases, that's a drag on the community. It doesn't serve the community well, the general community. Right. So we have found, we've been doing this here at US Rubber for nearly 2 decades, going back to the year 2001, 2002. Okay. And bringing ex-felons in. And so we don't give special or preferential treatment to ex-felons, but we take that issue off the table. Right. We make it clear with the halfway houses, as long as it's not murder, rape, or child molestation, we'll give somebody a second chance. So the halfway houses know not to send those types of individuals our way, but we never ask what people do. If some we do find out later. It's kind of ironic because when in the halfway house, they're being drug tested, and quite often we don't drug test when they come in. There's no need to. It's been done, but it's a bit of a challenge because these are individuals that are broken. Yeah. They've been in prison for years, and there takes a little bit of time, like in years, to get back to them, to who they really are as a person, and to believe in themselves. That's the other thing that's important is what kind of a culture do we create around them? Because for many, many years, they've been told they're worthless. They're the worst part of society, on and on and on. Right. And now they come here and they're getting the chance to contribute and to show these people gratitude and to say thank you, or you're doing a great job. Their self-esteem, it's amazing to see the rise in them. Most of them come out numb out of prison, no emotion. And after about 6 months to a year, you start to see the emotion come out of them. Right. And it's really rewarding to see that. And to see these guys, most of our workers are male. We have a few women, but to see these guys come out of it, and the reason we have so many men is just the heavy lifting involved. Just want to make that clear. It's the nature of the job, and most of the men have to be fairly young because I think once you get north of 40, it's hard to lift all the things you got to lift.
Yeah, I can certainly understand. If we can, Jeff, I'd like to backtrack a little bit because basically, we were talking about what you were doing in 2009 with the furniture company, and I know you've only been here about 1.5 years. Give us some insight as to what happened in between and what attracted you to US Rubber and how did you manage to come out here?
Well, I enjoyed my time at Taylor. I was there for 17.5 years. Okay. Taylor was a privately held company, 7 generations. I haven't learned about the 7-generation philosophy. That was kind of cool. Where if you make a decision, it should last for 7 generations. And we could prove in our company that was not just a theoretical concept. It was actually, we could show the practice of our company, things we had done in 1816, 190 some years prior that were still in play today. Wow. But what happened with Taylor was we just got caught up, multiple things at the same time with the recession going on, the credit crisis. There was a couple of issues involved with unfortunately, with the remediation of our brownfield that were involved with at the state level about the tax abatement. We were granted one, then it was taken away, and we got caught up in the middle of that. But I think with the biggest thing was everything happened at the same time, and we made a decision to close the doors, and that was August of 2012. Okay. And so for me,
that was just that facility. You still had the other plants and the other locations, correct?
But we shut everything down, all 3. We sold off the company assets. It wasn't a bankruptcy. We just ended the business, and we all went our separate ways. And so for me, I had practiced law with the national law firm prior to joining Taylor in '95, but I couldn't go back to law. I'd been out too long. So we're in the middle of the recession now. The manufacturing recession in 2012. And so I remember I looking for a CEO, COO position in Cleveland. Those opportunities were few and far between. Right. Someone recommended to me, if you really want to find one, read the obituaries because nobody's given those up until they die. So I think that was half joke, half true. But what I ended up doing, I did some consulting in Cleveland, and then I found a consulting opportunity. Southern California was home away from home for me because
Okay.
our biggest market at Taylor was Southern California.
Right.
I was out here 250 times plus over the 17 years.
Wow.
I remember the Thompson Guide map. I learned all the freeways, so I did my time on the
Right.
freeways. Most of my time was spent in Los Angeles County, a little bit in Orange County, or then not too much out in Riverside, San Bernardino. But we had a couple of customers out here, but not
Right.
many. But
Now, didn't Taylor make office furniture? Isn't that what you get? Okay.
right.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
we had in our factory, we had one of our second largest factories up in Linwood.
Okay.
That was another reason to be out here so often. So I found a consulting opportunity in 2014, in early 2014, and that's when I moved out here. And I was there in that role for about 3 years, and I got an opportunity to join another consulting company, form a new division, which we did. And I was there from spring of 17 to the end, just the very beginning of 19 last year. And unfortunately, they made changes in their direction, and they shut our division down. They kept all the people that I brought over, that joined me when I came over, and I was let go. So the reason I was attracted to U.S. Rubber, though, I went out and luckily I had done a lot of networking in Orange County, and where I live in Irvine, so did a lot of networking out there. And U.S. Rubber had retained a recruiter who was based in Orange County, but his expertise was the Inland Empire. So he had gotten my name, and it's Jim McNee. I'll never forget the first phone call. I think the first 10 minutes he kept telling me why I don't want this job. And I thought it was funny. Well, wait, let's get past the why I don't want it. Why do I want it? And the first thing he knew I lived in Irvine. He said it's in Colton. I never heard of Colton. I didn't even know where Colton was.
Right.
So I asked him to tell me where that was, and he said, well, it's halfway between Riverside and San Bernardino. And I barely knew where those two cities were. So I knew I passed them both on the way to Palm Springs. That was about it. So that was a very interesting, and in my last job, I had a 1.5 mile commute. In the prior job, I had a 2.5 mile commute. Well, now I have a 47 mile commute. So that was the other reason. But in the company, US Rubber, when I got here, was smaller than what I was used to, much smaller. But what attracted me to it was I did want to get back into manufacturing. I really enjoyed making something, a widget.
Right. Okay.
And I really enjoyed embedding sustainable practices into the business model. That meant a lot to me at Taylor, and I enjoyed speaking on the subject. And I could see it was such a natural thing at US Rubber because of what we do just in general, taking that waste stream for our raw materials. So that's what drew me to it. But when I got here, this was a gold mine because the company was flat in sales for many, many years and had a very entrepreneurial spirit to it. And I thought, well, gosh, with a little bit of discipline and the right people and giving them the opportunities, away we can go. And so I spent the first year really focused on rebuilding the business and injecting some discipline, things I learned at Taylor that I inherited, if you will.
Right.
A good inventory control system, production control, cost accounting system. So we brought some consultants in, and also internally we did this as well. It was about a year in the making, then the relationships, and we had to make some changes personnel-wise at the top, but we got everything lined up, and then the pandemic hit, and but that hitting in late March, our whole world changed in April. Our sales jumped about 50%, and they've stayed there in April. So we jumped 50%, 50. But that was a year in the making, and it wasn't, and the reason it was just a coincidental time thing, but we built the right relationships in the right places. So when online sales took off, we picked the right horses. And so that's how the big jump occurred. And we put other things in place throughout the summer. So we stayed at that 50% jump up until this month. And now we're about to take off, and we've started this month, this being October of 2020. We're probably going to jump another 30% to 40% at the pace we're going.
On top of the 50?
On top of the 50.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Then we put something else in place, and that's going to kick in with a North American relationship with a global distributor. When that kicks in January of 2021, and you combine with everything else, by the end of 2021, our sales will double from where we stand today after the 50% growth.
Wow.
So we have, we're kind of busting at the seams here now. I know you haven't been here for a few months, but the parking lot's getting smaller and smaller because we have so much raw material
Right.
and work in process in the yards. But the factory itself is really, we're kind of bursting at the seams. We have 2 shifts going now. The second shift it's not the entire factory, but it's a good chunk of it. It's probably about 40%. And that's going to continue to grow with this growth. So we've been very fortunate in the sense that, sometimes people ask, were you lucky or did you work hard? How'd you get there? And, sometimes, if you look at the if you look at how luck can be defined, it tends to be random and non-predictable.
Right.
I would say what we've done is we worked hard, we positioned ourselves well to invite opportunity where, I wouldn't say it's a pure form of luck, but we were there. So when the opportunity arose, so for example, this 30 to 40% growth, which the only reason it's that number is I've got my foot on the brake. It's a contract that we're working on with the Home Depot.
Okay.
And so we're doing an online sales now, and we're going to then soon to be, we're finalizing a contract for in-store, and then possibly with their commercial contractors. So, we want to make sure we're successful every day, every week, every month with Home Depot. And this is 7-figure volume, multiple 7-figure volume. I mean, obviously they could bury us if they wanted to in the heartbeat. So I'm taking this in stages so we don't take on too much too quickly. Because the biggest challenge is people, and then also the capacity, it's supply chain too. We've tended to outgrow some of our suppliers. So not that we're abandoning them, we're supplementing them. So we have to find others. So that's a challenge as well. So it's been an interesting experience the last 6 months that we've been going through because I feel like we're scaling up like a tech company, in the sense that we're adding, so many people. You think about the CapEx expenditures that we're having to do. We're going to have to raise more funds to pay for all this because, cash gets tight when you grow because you have to buy more machines, carry higher inventory, more personnel. And then the people part is challenging because you just can't click your heels, hire somebody, they walk in the door and they know what to do on day one. There's a learning curve there. And obviously, I think the anxiety levels go up too. I've been telling everyone for months on end, they're not all, rock, being from Cleveland, you got to be a rock fan, right? Since rock and roll started in Cleveland. And I'd say to them, that there's a song by the Talking Heads called Burning Down the House.
Right.
And the opening line is, watch out, you might get what you're after.
Yeah, right.
And so that's kind of happened to us because we kept planning and I kept saying last year in the fall, this time last year, I say, it'll be coming next spring. By then, what we're doing, we're planting the seeds. We got the factory ready, and then we were on a parallel track. We worked on the marketing side, and it all hit at the same. The factory got prepared, but then the big jump in sales, and it can be very. There's a lot of anxiety. Let's just say that there's a lot of when you jump literally 50%.
It's just enormous.
People are freaking out. Yeah.
So let's go back, to how this, ties in with either conscious capitalism or responsible capitalism. Because basically, I think, the 3 things you want, like you said, prosperity, and you're certainly getting that. Handling your cash flow is another issue. But, you've talked about the people and what you're doing to be able to bring them along. And now you've also continued to use more and more defer things from going to the landfill. Try to give us a better picture, if you can, Jeff, as to how you see this moving forward, and you're continuing to make an impact, which may draw other businesses into this model, as opposed to the myth they're saying there's no money to be made here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's twofold. One has to, if you're a leader of a company, you don't have to be the top leader. Any leader at any level of a company, you're always evaluating, how can we cut costs or get more value out of the products we're using? Okay. And what I would say to someone like that is, first you gotta you got to like turn the faucet off on your waste, what goes out the door, what you're sending to a landfill, because your one man's trash is another man's treasure. You need to identify even within your own operations, what could be recycled, what could be upcycled, what could be diverted. And you don't have to sell it to make money. I mean, I remember at Taylor, we gave it away in most cases, but we still saved 20,000, 25,000 on hauling.
Sure.
The same thing could be, could happen out here for a business. Energy conservation. The number one thing I will tell every single manufacturer around is get an energy audit. It's that simple. I had an energy audit performed in Cleveland. I had one performed in Linwood. So one in Linwood was done by SCE, so in California Edison. In Cleveland, it was a private consultant. And I had the energy audit done in Cleveland after we built a new factory. And we still found a couple thousand a year by just making some adjustments to the equipment. The number one, and I learned from this, the number one energy waste in a factory is your air compressor.
Yeah, exactly. Having worked in manufacturing, it's funny how many air compressors have leaks in them, and the motors are running 24/7. And yeah, thank you.
So I learned this is a decade ago, more than a decade ago, a 1/8 inch leak in the air hose, $200 a year. That was in Cleveland. Electricity here is 3 times as much. So maybe that's $600 a year. 1/8 of an inch. So if you hear that hissing, that's $20 bills going out your window continuously, so think of it that way. But also it's not only just the hissing or the air leaks, but what pressure point do you have it set at? Because you may have it recycling too often, where you don't need that much pressure to run your factory. But that's where the audit will open your eyes to improvements can be made.
So your recommendation is that manufacturing all get an energy audit just to get a kind of a baseline. Okay. Yes,
you'll get a roadmap as what can I improve, and you don't have to. Some of them you'll have to spend money to save money, but in both of my experiences with it, we found ways to save energy without save money and save energy without spending a dime. I mean, or a de minimis amount of money. It was
right.
And so we found that. But then, the impact, I said, with U.S. Rubber. So beyond just the story, what attracted me to U.S. Rubber was the potential.
Yes.
So I see this company growing 8-fold in 5 years.
Wow.
And I'm confident we're going to do it. But the people part is the hardest part. I've shared this story often internally. When I was young, whatever it was, my dad told me everything in life is easy until people get involved. And it's so true, because you have competing agendas, competing opinions, differences, whatever it may be, but also the hiring. When you're hiring the ex-felons, it's not just you hire them and everything's gravy after that.
Right.
So we have to keep reinforcing the mindset of not what you're going to get from this job, it's what are you going to become from this job.
Interesting.
You're trying to turn your life around. What do you want to become? And what are you doing? There's two things, what are you doing and who are you hanging around with outside of work? Do they serve what you want to become? So I make the point, some of these guys, it's like, you're gonna get drunk this weekend or high this weekend, smoking dope or drinking beer or whatever it is. Does that serve what you want to become? Because if you come in on Monday hungover, you're going to perform poorly, which is going to, put your job at risk.
Right.
Or you're hungover or not in good enough shape, you miss work. You're jeopardizing your job over getting high. Does getting high really what you want to become? Because that's the very simple question, but getting them to think about that. But from what I've read, and I'm by no means an expert, but that a solid economic core, having a good job in the center of your life, that seems to stabilize a lot of other areas. But those other areas could jeopardize that job. So we have to keep reinforcing that internally. But I even think if you don't have ex-felons, that's an important, they're not the only ones. We all have to look at that in our lives. Are we doing, what do we want to become and what am I engaged in? Does it serve that goal? And but to your question also, so what I go back to the people. You will find the funds from the waste, the waste diversion and energy conservation in your company it will put money on your bottom line.
Mm.
And then you get back into, do you want to reinvest in your people, or are you going to extract the money from the business? If you don't reinvest a portion of that, you're going to have a problem. You're not going to get to your goal of growing, because it's people, again, I go to something else when I was a kid. When I was a little kid, coming from Cleveland, my dad got me a book from Woody Hayes, and it was entitled "You
Right,
Win
right.
with," yeah, "You Win with People,"
Right.
and that's so true, because if you don't reinvest in your people, you're not good. That, again, triple bottom line, you're not going to get there. You can't just keep churning people out like they're a disposable widget that you don't, that you can just go get another one. Your business is going to stall out, and you'll have a toxic culture.
If I could make an observation at this point, and I might refer this to you, I don't know if you've seen 2-Second Lean by Paul Akers.
No, I haven't. No.
It's a great book. I'll make sure you get a copy. But basically, he makes a point in there, because his company went through lean, and he found he was struggling because he was on the right path, but his people weren't. And when he went to Toyota in Japan, he wanted to find out. He said, "What's the most important thing for you guys?" And he was thinking they were going to give him some kind of a process. And the vice president of Toyota said, "It's our people. If we can't develop our people, we can't do anything else." And it was kind of a shock to him, because he hadn't really thought about it in that term. When he came back and he engaged his people and said, "Look, we have to work together," it literally, that transformed it. And then they began to save incredible amounts of money and make the company more profitable. And also, as a side, they weren't even trying to be sustainable in the way that you and I think about it. But
Right.
like we did at Taylor, all of a sudden they had this huge impact. They said, "We never thought of this as green, but it is."
Yeah, yeah. And one of the terms that I remember when I was at Taylor, I brought here to US Rubber, and it's funny because the acronym AI back then was appreciative inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about AI now, it's
Yes,
artificial
right.
intelligence. So I want to talk about AI appreciative inquiry. To your point, and whoever the author's point in his book, is you need to get everybody at the table, because everybody looks at a situation through a different lens.
Yeah.
If you allow everyone to speak freely in a safe environment where they won't be chastised for being wrong or being silly, or that's my opinion is worth more than yours. No, they're all equal. If you create that environment, or that ecosystem of appreciative inquiry where people can contribute, it's amazing what the people will contribute to make your company better.
Yes.
And so that's what I brought here to US Rubber, saying, we're here, we want to get there.
Right.
And then we'd have our meetings, and we'd have the contribution of how we're going to build it, how are we going to do that.
Right.
And it's really been a lot of fun. It's empowering to everyone. But when they've never had, but not only do you get their ideas, then you put people in charge or responsible. And that's a little scary for them when they've never had that responsibility. Now they're used to it. It's been a year, more than a year of doing this. But that appreciative inquiry, I think, is very central to what we're doing at US Rubber, and it was important at Taylor as well. But you have to get, the people on board. And I remember seeing a quote on LinkedIn a couple different times. I don't know who the quote was attributed to, but it was something along the lines of, it wasn't even a quote. It was a fictitious conversation where one executive was talking to another, and the first executive said, "What happens if we invest all this money in our people and they leave?" And then the other executive says, "What if we don't and they stay?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think if you invest in your people, they're going to appreciate what you're doing. Yeah, some may leave, and that's okay. You should never hold somebody back from trying to advance their own career. But in the same token, if you do things right, authentically, they're going to stick around, because you're going to keep doing them. You're not going to just do it once and done. Right. And when they can tell you're truly investing in them, and it's for the betterment of the entire organization, not an individual, not the shareholders, not the top executives, but everybody is going to benefit from this, you're going to get a more collaborative environment, more contribution, more than you ever could have done on your own. And like you said, you can't have the guy at the top or the gal at the top, oh, she or he is all in and doing the right things, but nobody else is. It doesn't work. That's just.
Oh, absolutely. Have you read Conscious Capitalism by John McKay?
I've bits and pieces, but not the whole book.
It's a wonderful book, and I encourage you to look at it. But the key is, one of his points is that he's made it. There's one of the things in their company is that there is no more than 19 per times difference between the lowest paid worker and the highest paid worker. And of course, you know, in the industry as a whole, it's not uncommon to see 300 times more money made by the executive. And he's asked, he said, well, how come your people don't leave? And it was for the very reason you said, Jeff, is that people stay because they really love it there, and the money isn't as meaningful to them as having the chance to contribute to something that makes a difference.
Correct. Yeah, that
And
makes
I
total
think,
sense.
yeah, and I think that's where today, you know, a lot of what we're moving toward is that people really see this opportunity to be in what we call responsible capitalism as a huge opportunity. You know, it's okay. Capitalism is the institution in the United States or in the world that's really made an enormous difference. Now,
Right.
it's got some ugly characteristics, but if we refine those, it's still the most powerful mechanism for being able to develop people to sustain the world, and also, like you said, be able to elevate people at the same time. So you can preserve the planet, you can keep people moving forward, and you can make money.
Right.
You know,
Right. And I think the other thing is the human spirit, where you are valued and you're respected, but also you're building something collectively. It's something special.
yeah, yeah,
That's another thing I bring up to the guys is to, on the factory, to say, I want you to go home and be proud to say, look at what we're doing at US Rubber. I helped build that company. You go back to the quote from John F. Kennedy when he was touring NASA back in, I don't know, 61, 62. And he ran into, I guess, I don't know if this is true, maybe urban legend, but
yeah.
ran into the janitor and asked him what he was doing at NASA. And the janitor said, I'm helping put a man on the moon. And every person's job is important.
Yeah.
And we all contribute in different ways, but they're all important. And
Right.
they can't be taken for granted, and they can't be looked down upon. And but I think when the employees of the company see that the leadership can be trusted,
Mhm.
and values them, who knows what they could do, what they're capable of. And like you said, and if they economically share at the appropriate levels, like I said, capitalism, it's one thing where, we can all make a good buck doing what we're doing. But when one party gets too greedy, again, another quote, just too much Midwest in me, but, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. You get too greedy, it's all going to crumble. It won't work. And people are going to see that. And they won't rise up to the level you need them to and want them to. And everyone loses too. The greedy guy or gal at the top loses, and the workers lose on an opportunity to build a special organization. So
Right.
it's a
And
double.
I think, having come from the Midwest, we've seen too much of that. I mean, the Rust Belt is the Rust Belt for a reason. As we kind of wrap this up, Jeff, tell me a little bit about what advice you would give to somebody trying to follow your model to be able to build a sustainable company that has the three elements on its bottom line.
I think what you have to do is to have a curious mind, in the sense of you're open to trying and exploring and searching and seeking new ideas. Is there a better way? Is there a different way? You get out of the mindset of this is the way we've always done it, or this is the way that everybody else does it. Is to ask the ones that you'd like to model your company's behavior, saying, well, how did you divert waste? How did you conserve natural resources? And like, to your question you've asked many times, how did it affect your bottom line? Do I have to spend $1 million and wait 100 years to get my money back? Or is there an efficient, cash efficient way? And I think if a leader looks at it that way, the outcome will occur. And you have to make it, you have to look at all the stakeholders involved. And from your supply chain to the community in which you work in, to the employees that work within the company, that there should be something in it for everyone if you do it the right way, but open your mind to the possibility. It's out there. You just have to figure it out. And I will say, it's a heck of a lot easier in 2020 than it was back in 2010.
Right.
So, or 2000. It's getting easier and easier to do that. There's really no excuse not to.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is that, as a transition of people understanding the impact of the three elements and the impact that we have on the planet itself, that you're finding people more and more receptive. And even the financial community is now looking more closely at companies that are doing the right thing as opposed to just the profitable thing. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely, because the financial community is recognizing too that the two things we started off this conversation with is A, that the narrative to some customer bases is bigger than the widget itself. So if you have the right narrative, and B is, or number two is, it puts money in the piggy bank. It really
Right,
does.
right.
And
For them too.
for everybody, for the
Right,
company,
right.
shareholders, and everybody else. That's correct, Ray. Yep.
Well, Jeff, I really appreciate it. Thank you for the time you've given us. I'm confident that if other people can understand this and learn more, there are ways to be able to move ahead and really build companies that can survive like Taylor did for 190 years, for 7 generations. So thanks again. I appreciate it. I look forward to coming over and seeing the plant. I haven't seen it in 6 months, and it sounds like, you were enthusiastic then, and your enthusiasm is still there. So
Oh yeah,
thank you so much.
absolutely, absolutely. You may have to park in the street though, because the
Right.
parking spaces in a lot are getting smaller and smaller. So
I ride
right.
my bike, so maybe I'll just take my bike over there. That way I don't take as much space.
There you go. Then you can park anywhere you want to do. That'd be great. Well, thank you, Ray. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what we've been doing, and hopefully it'll help others get on the right path as well.
Thank you, Jeff. And you have a good day. I appreciate it. And good luck to US Rubber moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Ray. All right.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.